harvest ends in the background. Stays in the brain.
Out here in northern New Mexico, donde la tierra meets the sky, sits Taos, a place that looks like straight-up utopia. Wide open skies, high desert light, and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains standing firme en la distancia, like something out of a dream. You roll in past sagebrush and quiet roads, and it feels peaceful, almost untouched. Pero no te confundas. This land is as beautiful as it is unforgiving.
Taos is a beautiful, beautiful area. It's very spiritual. They say it hums. I don't know about that, but I believe people when they say that. It has a holy mountain there, sacred to the Pueblo people, but also sacred tierra sagrada for the Mexicano people of Taos. You see it in the adobe churches at San Francisco de Asís. You see it in the faces of the people, the different ancestry, the mixed ancestry. You see this amazing coming together of humanity through the centuries in the food, in the different languages, in the gorge, that beautiful gorge. It's an intense place to be.
Yeah, the spiritualness in Taos is very strong, and it continues on to this day. Where it's located is, of course, in the northern part of New Mexico. So the landscape behind it is just, breathtaking and beautiful with the mountains and, of course, the water that runs through there. And of course, the big trees and have you. Of course, the winters can be a little bit harsh down in Taos, but to actually walk into the city of Taos, or actually Taos Pueblo, and to know that Taos Pueblo is one of the oldest inhabited civilizations in North America, alongside Acoma or Sky City.
Just that it is very magical. It has a lot of historical sites to come and visit, and historical figures are very important. It almost markets itself. It has an excellent brand. Just the name Taos is known around the world, and people have art pieces from Taos. They were contributed from a number of different artists and photographers that have been here, and a lot of people have just come here and left a legacy.
Just outside of town, the Rio Grande slices deep into the earth, carving out that legendary gorge. The bridge stretches across it like a thin line between past and present. Wind cuts through you. The river roars far below, and for a moment, everything feels still. But Taos is never still. It holds stories, some beautiful, some heavy.
The gorge is a very major prime attraction to people coming to Taos. The gorge has millennials of history. The way it was carved out was through running water. They had a lot of water up in Colorado that flowed south, and over the millennium created this huge gorge, and then a bridge was built in 1965, and now it's considered to be a prime attraction.
Long before borders, before flags, before governments, this land belonged to the people of Taos Pueblo. Hundreds of generations lived here, building homes from Mother Earth, living in rhythm with nature, guided by tradition and spirit. This was not just survival. This was identity.
The area was surrounded by native nomadic tribes, and there was a lot of warfare here, a lot of love, but a lot of conflict.
Then came Spain. Soldiers, priests, and governors pushed north, bringing Catholicism and control.
That began in Taos in the late 1590s. Juan de Oñate colonized New Mexico in 1598, and he is placed in Taos in July of 1598. And he assigned a Franciscan to the Pueblo to establish a mission church at the Taos Pueblo. And that construction of that mission church happened in around 1615. So the mission church at the Pueblo was the first European structure that we had in Taos. And so it's significant because that means that was the early onset of Spanish colonization in Taos. And then it continued through the 1600s. There weren't a lot of people here at that time, but the presence was here. They established land grants and started subsistence agriculture. And then the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 happened. And at that time, 70 Taoseños were killed in that revolt. It was when the Pueblos united and forced the Spaniards out of what is now New Mexico back to the El Paso, Texas area. And so it was after the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 and then the recolonization and resettlement that we have most of the activity in Taos. The people came back with a different motivation at this time, not so much to find precious minerals, gold and silver, but more to work the land, to build acequias, establish land grants, and build a society that was based on barter. Their faith, they had very strong faith because the Spaniards, when they came into New Mexico, always were accompanied by the Franciscan friars. And their mission was not gold or precious metals, but it was to spread the faith. So in the 1700s, they came back with this motivation to establish communities that were very rooted in the mission churches, the Catholic religion, the faith, and of course, they survived doing subsistence agriculture.
Churches rose from the soil, and a new system took hold. But it was never simple. Indigenous belief and Catholic faith began to blend, sometimes peacefully, sometimes through force.
The Pueblo people of Taos had been there for centuries. And then the Mexican people who were there, they had been there for centuries as well. They were a mix of the original Spanish settlers, Mexican Indians, Pueblo people, and the Genizaros, the slave class of New Mexico from the 1700s. And they were very independent people up there. They tended to resist Spanish rule, Mexican rule, and of course, when the Americans came, they were not happy to have another empire imposed on them.
In the 1680s, tension erupted during the Pueblo Revolt. Indigenous communities rose up against Spanish rule, driving them out in one of the most successful uprisings in North American history.
During the colonial period and into the Mexican period, there was a lot of warfare in New Mexico, in all directions, with the Spanish and the Pueblo on one side, the Comanche, Apache, Navajo people on the other. There was always this tension, conflict, violence. So Taos was one of the places where you had these things happen at times. I mean, we New Mexicans killed 3 governors. We killed a governor under each flag. that ruled over us. We killed Governor Luis Rosas in 1642 under Spain. We killed Albino Perez under Mexico in 1837. And then, of course, Charles Bent, the civil governor under the United States in 1847 at Taos.
And that is something you must understand about the Nuevo and the Mexico. Under three flags, Spain, Mexico, and the United States. And under each one, there was big-time conflict. Under each one, blood was spilled. New Mexico is the only place where a governor has been killed under all three flags. New Mexico took out the Spanish governor Luis de Rosas, assassinated in Santa Fe in January of 1642. Then, New Mexico took out Mexican governor Albino Perez in August of 1837, killed by the local Hispanics of Santa Fe and Chimayo. And then, the U.S. governor, Governor Bent.
And this opening of the Mexican border to Americans was both a blessing and a curse. They brought goods, ideas, people, but also manifest destiny. Charles Bent was from West Virginia, born there in 1799. He was a military man, but he came to New Mexico on the Santa Fe Trail in 1828 with his brother. They were merchants. They came to be businessmen and established themselves in Santa Fe and then in Taos. Over the years, he integrated himself in the local population. He married a local Mexican woman, Ignacia Jaramillo. And he was a politically astute guy who became a Mexican citizen, but still was an American who they say sometimes looked down on the local Mexican population. So he was involved in local politics and local economics, and also helped establish forts along the Santa Fe Trail to secure the area, such as Bent's Fort, for trade.
Taos was a major outpost, so they had connections to Taos. Kit Carson had come into Taos in 1826, and Cedon St. Lorraine had come in 1825. They were primarily mountain men, essentially, earlier on, but they also became traders. And so they would make trips up into Colorado to Bent's Fort to trade. But Charles Bent moved eventually from Bent's Fort down into Taos and established himself here.
Bent began befriending a lot of prominent business owners there, and it wasn't a very long time thereafter that the Hispanos and Mexicans and of course the native community or population began to see what Charles Bent was doing. He wasn't a citizen of Mexico, but by way of his significant other, begin to be silent partners in a lot of land deals or land grant deals, signed off by then Governor Armijo. So that's essentially how he started to gain traction and who he was there in the northern part of New Mexico.
But Americans started to come on the Santa Fe Trail, people with names like Carson, McGoffin, and Bent.
By 1846, during the Mexican-American War, the United States took control of New Mexico. To some, it meant change. To others, it felt like occupation. Land, religion, and identity were all at stake. The tension was building. Quiet, but purposeful.
Legacy, this history in New Mexico of independence and rebelliousness, we don't like being told what to do.
That tension broke in 1847 with the Taos Revolt. This was not random violence. This was resistance. Locals, including Taos Pueblo allies, Chicanos, Genizaros, and Comanches, came together to push back. They were defending more than land. They were defending who they were.
people that were here remained here. Stephen Watts Carney basically named Charles Bent as the governor of New Mexico, and that was in summer of 1846, and he would continue to be governor of New Mexico, spend his time mostly in Santa Fe because that was still the capital. But in January of 1846, there was an event in Taos known in some circles as just the Taos Revolt. I prefer to call it the Taos Revolt resistance because it's always been seen as somewhat of a resistance to American occupation that had taken place in 1846.
Just like the Spanish brought their version of manifest destiny to New Mexico in the 1600s, so in the 1800s, the Americans arrive. And New Mexicans are conflicted. The Americans are bringing some good things along the Santa Fe Trail, but they're nervous. They're nervous about new government. They're nervous about losing their land, their culture. So there's tension in New Mexico. And the Americans who had come to New Mexico during the Mexican period had become part of the Mexican system, but now the Americans were coming with their military on the Santa Fe Trail. And now those Americans with names like Carson and Bent, they were all of a sudden kind of switching sides and joining the Americans in the conquest and invasion and occupation of New Mexico.
At the center of it all was Charles Bent, the first American governor of the territory, a man trying to hold authority in a place that did not fully accept him. He chose Taos as his base, thinking it might offer stability. Pero Taos has its own energy.
And there had been rumors of a conspiracy of a revolt happening in Santa Fe in December, but then that didn't happen, or it was quashed. And so in January 19th of 1846, a group of people from the Pueblo, led by Tomasito Romero, and a group of people here in Taos that were concerned with a lot of issues that were happening, primarily the land grant issues that were coming up. They felt that the people coming in were trying to take over the land grants, and there was concerns over the avoidance of the taxes that were supposed to be paid coming down the Santa Fe Trail. They were concerned with the brewing of the Taos Lightning, or agua ardiente, that was being brewed at San Cristobal.
At one point, Charles Bent went to his home in Taos without any military escort, and he was at home with his family, his wife and children.
And so they joined together, and it became a swirl of violence. It was somewhat of a protest, but Governor Bent had just come back from Santa Fe the night before.
They went into the house, they broke in, and the family dug holes through the adobe to escape, the children and the wife, but they caught Charles Bent.
And so they had essentially attacked his home on Bent Street, is now known as the Bent Museum, and ultimately they captured him, and
they shot him with their pistolas or arquebuses, whatever guns they had, and bows and arrows, and then they scalped him alive.
And scalped him and killed him. So it was a very violent, bloody event.
Bent was stripped of his clothes. He was scalped, and his scalp was then later displayed for everyone to see. Governor Bent's family, some of them were able to escape by digging a hole through the wall of their home and escaping that way.
They spared Ignacia, his wife, and the children, but it was a message. They were resisting the Americans. They were resisting the Americanos, and they wanted to protect their land, their families, and their culture.
And just like before, a Spanish governor had been killed, a Mexican governor had been killed, and now an American governor. 3 governments, 3 eras, one land that never gave up without a fight.
We rebel against governments, we rebel against the church, the Catholic Church, when the priests or the bishops would get too forceful with the local people. We've always had to be somewhat independent because we were neglected. We were neglected by Spain, we were neglected by Mexico, and then we were neglected by the United States.
There were a few battles that had taken place. Shortly thereafter, they began to retreat back into Taos, into the church there at Taos Pueblo, and U.S. Army began to surround that area and began to, fire, whether it was gunshots or cannonballs, unable to penetrate the walls there of the church there at Taos Pueblo. They began to climb the roofs and an attempt to light that church on fire.
It's never pleasant to be on the receiving end of conquest, no matter who's doing it, and no matter what good things they're bringing. But conquest changes the people who are being conquered, but the conquered people also change the conquerors. The Spanish who came here eventually became mestizo and part native, and the Americanos came here and became part Mexicano. So yes, their children are running around part Mexicano, part Anglo, and just like in the 16 and 1700s, the children here were part Spanish and part Puebloan, part Genízaro Indian. So this mixing is happening in spite of prejudice and racism which existed.
Allá en el norte, donde rezan las montañas. This one for Taos. There's a road that winds through the high desert.
Taos Pueblo has always been fiercely proud and independent, and I think northern New Mexicans have been fiercely proud and independent. So had he survived, he would have had to learn to live with and work with the northern New Mexicans, because we have a history of doing things our own way.
Se siente the footsteps from ancient days. Adobe walls and the Rio runs slow, carrying historias only the viejitos know. Where the mountains pray, oh towns where the mountain prays, where the viento sings them old time ways. From the pueblo fires to the canyon floor, you can feel that espíritu forevermore. Indio, hispano, lado a lado through the years, where the pride bien bravo, it ain't just land, it's a living soul. Aquí en Taos, sí, Nuevo Mexico. Morning light hits the pueblo fuerte, same wall standing, puro corazón y suerte. Sacred tierra where the people stay, holding on to who they are every single day. En Taos, where the mountains pray, you got lows cruising past old churches y cuentos of outlaws. The desierto still tells from the Wild West days to the lives today. Es una fuerza distinta built this way. Where the mountains pray, oh Taos, where the mountains pray.
The aftermath was harsh. American forces responded quickly, crushing the revolt, restoring control. Pero el espíritu de Taos did not disappear. It stayed in the people, in the culture, in the way this place continues to stand strong.
No hay lugar like that northern sky donde the águila circle y el río cries. You don't just visit, llegas a entender there's something deeper you can't compare. Where the mountains pray. They say time moves fast en este mundo, pero Taos camina firme y profundo. With every prayer y every canción, un espíritu